The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and wondered what waited for them in the darkness between worlds. In the year 2347, they finally had their answer, and it was not the answer they had hoped for. 40 years ago, humanity had joined the Galactic Council. It was supposed to be a moment of celebration. Earth had proven itself worthy of standing among the ancient races of the galaxy, but the elder species did not see it that way. To them, humans were children, newcomers, a species that had barely learned to walk among the stars. The Dominion was the oldest member of the Council. Their civilization had existed for 50,000 years. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and ruled over dozens of species. When they looked at humanity, they saw nothing but insects trying to sit at the table of giants. The trouble began in the Orion sector. Rich deposits of rare minerals had been discovered on several unclaimed moons. Human mining companies moved in first. They claimed the territory belonged to them. Small fights broke out, ships were damaged, people died. Earth's government wanted peace. They did not want a war with a species that had been traveling through space when humans were still living in caves. So they sent a diplomatic mission to negotiate. Admiral Park was chosen to lead this mission. He was 62 years old, with gray hair and a face marked by decades of service. He had fought in the Mars Unification War 30 years ago. He had helped bring peace to the asteroid colonies. He was known as a man who preferred talking to fighting. His ship was called named after the national flower of Korea. It was not a warship. It carried no heavy weapons. It was built for diplomacy, with meeting rooms and communication systems instead of guns. 2,400 people served aboard the commander was the tactical officer, a sharp woman in her 40s who had served with Park for 15 years. Dr. Lee was the chief medical officer, a gentle man who had joined the mission because he believed in peace. There were engineers and scientists, translators and diplomats. They were the best humanity had to offer. They carried terms of peace. Earth was willing to share the mining rights. They were willing to compromise. They believed that reasonable beings could find reasonable solutions. They were wrong. The Galactic Council had already made their decision. High Arbiter, the leader of the Council, had met with thee and their allies in secret. They agreed that humanity needed to be taught a lesson. The young species was growing too confident. They needed to be reminded of their place. There was ambushed near the neutral station of Axis Prime. 12 warships surrounded them. Admiral Park ordered his crew not to fight. They had come in peace, and they would not fire the first shot. They did not care. They disabled the engines with precise strikes. They boarded the ship and took everyone prisoner. Admiral Park surrendered his sword to the commander and asked only that his crew be treated with dignity. The commander laughed in his face. For 3 months, Earth demanded the return of their people. President sent message after message to the Galactic Council. She asked for negotiations. She offered to withdraw all human ships from the disputed sector. She was willing to give the everything they wanted. The Council did not respond. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Families waited for news of their loved ones. The people of Earth watched their screens, hopping for any word about the. Then came the broadcast. It was transmitted on every frequency. Every human colony received it. Every ship, every station, every home with a communication device saw what happened next. The broadcast showed a large chamber on Prime, the capital world of the Dominion. Thousands of alien spectators filled the seats, watching like it was entertainment. In the center of the chamber stood Admiral Park. His uniform was torn. His face was covered in dried blood. He had been beaten many times, but he stood straight. He did not bow his head. Behind him, arranged in rows, stood his crew, 2,400 men and women who had come in peace. High Arbiter walked to the center of the chamber. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and eyes that showed no warmth. He looked at the cameras with contempt. "Let this serve as a reminder," said, his voice cold. "Humanity is not equal to the elder races. Humanity does not negotiate with the council. Humanity obeys. This is the fate of those who forget their place." Admiral Park looked directly at the camera. He knew billions of humans were watching. He knew these were his last moments. He spoke clearly, wanting his people to hear every word. "Do not mourn us, we did our duty. We came in peace and we will die with honor, but remember this day, remember what they did, and never let them do it again." A soldier struck him across the face. Park fell to his knees but immediately stood again. He would not kneel before his executioners. The weapons fired. 2,400 humans died in seconds. The broadcast showed everything. It showed the bodies falling. It showed the spectators cheering. It showed High Arbiter smiling. On Earth, the world stopped. President watched from the United Terran Parliament building in Seoul. The room was filled with generals and admirals, politicians and advisors. When the broadcast ended, no one spoke. Some wept silently. Others stared at the blank screen with faces that had gone pale. In the streets of every city on Earth, people had gathered around public screens. When the execution ended, a sound rose from the crowds. It was not crying. It was not screaming. It was something deeper, a sound of grief and rage mixed together. President stood slowly. She was 58 years old, a former professor of law who had entered politics to make the galaxy a better place. She had always believed in diplomacy. She had always believed that civilized beings could solve their problems without violence. She did not believe that anymore. Her voice was steady when she spoke. It was cold, like ice forming over a deep lake. "Recall every ambassador, call back every fleet, seal the borders." She turned to Fleet Marshal, the oldest soldier in the room. He was 71 years old, a man who had spent his entire life preparing for a war he hoped would never come. "Marshal," she said, "prepare for total war." The old soldier stood at attention. His eyes were wet, but his voice was firm. "Yes, Madam President." Across the galaxy, the celebrated. They believed they had crushed humanity's spirit. They believed the young species would now understand their place in the universe. They expected fear and submission. They had no idea what they had just begun. They did not understand humans at all. They did not know that humanity had spent its entire history fighting against those who tried to destroy them. They did not know that humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars against each other. Most importantly, they did not know what happened when you hurt a human's family. They were about to learn. The galaxy waited for humanity to attack. Every military commander in Council space prepared for immediate war. They expected human ships to come screaming out of their borders within days, filled with rage and desperate for revenge. Days passed, nothing happened. Weeks passed, the borders remained sealed. 1 month after the execution, High Arbiter addressed the Galactic Council. He stood in the same chamber where Admiral Park had died, and he laughed. "The humans have accepted their place," he declared. "They know they cannot defeat us. They hide behind their borders like frightened animals. Let this be proof that the Council made the right choice. Humanity is weak." The other council members agreed. The hegemony, ancient allies of the, had been worried at first. They were a warrior species, and they respected courage. They had seen how Admiral Park faced death, but now they believed the rest of humanity did not share his strength. Across council space, life returned to normal. The execution was forgotten, just another small event in the long history of the galaxy. Humanity was a minor species, and minor species did not matter. Behind Earth's sealed borders, the reality was very different. Fleet Marshal stood in the command center of the United Terran military. Screens surrounded him, showing activity across every human world. What he saw made him proud beyond words. Every shipyard in human space was working. Day and night, around the clock, new warships were being built. The yards that had been making passenger ships and cargo vessels had been converted to produce destroyers and cruisers. New designs, created in secret over the past decade, were finally being constructed. But it was not just the military that had changed. Across human space, the entire civilization was transforming. Factories that once made furniture now produced weapons. Companies that built homes now constructed military bases. Schools added combat training to their programs. Hospitals practiced treating battlefield injuries. The entire economy shifted toward a single purpose. No one had ordered this. President had declared war, but she had not demanded these changes. The people of humanity chose this path themselves. Every man and woman, from the oldest grandmother to the youngest adult, wanted to contribute. The military expected to draft soldiers. They did not need to. Recruitment centers were overwhelmed with volunteers. People quit their jobs and lined up to serve. Retired soldiers came out of retirement. Scientists offered their skills to the war effort. Artists created propaganda to keep spirits high. Captain was one of the new generation of officers. She was 29 years old, a pilot who had graduated at the top of her class. Her older brother had served on the as a navigation officer. She had watched him die on the broadcast. She did not cry. She did not scream. She simply walked to the nearest recruitment center and asked for the most dangerous assignment available. Now she trained new pilots at the orbital academy above Earth. Her students feared her. She pushed them harder than any instructor they had ever faced. She made them fly simulation after simulation until their hands shook. She woke them in the middle of the night for surprise drills. "The council thinks we are soft," she told her students on their first day. "They think because we value life, we will not take it. They killed my brother because they believed this lie." She walked among them, looking each young pilot in the eyes. "I am going to make you into something they have never seen before. When this war begins, you will show them the difference between mercy and weakness. Mercy is a choice. Weakness is not having a choice. We will show them that we choose to be peaceful. We choose not to fight unless we must." She paused at the window, looking out at the stars. "They took away our choice. Now we will take away theirs." On the other side of human space, Colonel ran a very different operation. He was 45 years old, a quiet man who had spent his career in military intelligence. He did not wear a uniform anymore. He wore the clothes of a trader, a refugee, a diplomat. He could become anyone. For the past year, his operatives had been infiltrating council space. They disguised themselves as merchants from neutral species. They pretended to be refugees fleeing human aggression. They took jobs on space stations and planets throughout the Dominion and hegemony. They were everywhere and no one knew. Colonel's office was filled with maps and data. Every military installation in council space was marked. Every patrol route was noted. Every weakness was recorded. His people had spent months watching, listening, learning. "They believe their communication network is their greatest strength," he told President during a secret briefing. "Every fleet movement, every order, every piece of information flows through a central hub on the moon of Prime. If we destroy it, their entire military coordination will collapse." The president studied the data. "Can we reach it?" "It would require a faster-than-light jump directly into their system. The council believes this is impossible at such close range to a gravity well. Our navigators have spent the last year proving them wrong." President nodded slowly. "What else have you found?" Colonel smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Everything, Madam President. We know where they store their fuel. We know where they repair their ships. We know which officers are competent and which are fools. We know which species in their alliance are loyal and which are only waiting for an excuse to leave." He pointed to a list of names. "We also know which members of the council voted for the execution. and we know where each of them lives. Across human space, the preparations continued. New weapons were tested. New tactics were developed. Medical teams practiced saving lives in combat conditions. Engineers designed ships that could take damage and keep fighting. The galaxy saw none of this. Human space was completely sealed. No messages got out. No observers got in. For all the Council knew, humanity was hiding in fear. On the anniversary of the execution, President addressed her people. Every human in existence watched her speak. 1 year ago, they murdered our people and called us inferior. They killed 2,400 men and women who came in peace. They expected us to bow our heads and accept our place as lesser beings. Her face was hard, her voice was steady. They were wrong. For 1 year we have been silent, we have mourned our dead, we have prepared. Some have wondered why we waited, why we did not attack immediately. The answer is simple. We did not want a battle, we wanted a war, and we wanted to win. She leaned forward, her eyes burning with determination. Tomorrow our borders open. Tomorrow our fleets move. Tomorrow we remind the galaxy why Earth's ancestors conquered their own world through ice ages, through plagues, through wars against each other. We survived everything our planet could throw at us. We will survive this too. She stood straight, proud, unafraid. The Council sees us as children. Let them. Children grow up, and when you hurt a child's family, that child never forgets. Tomorrow we go to war, not for territory, not for resources. We go to war because they hurt our people, and we will not stop until every being in this galaxy understands one simple truth. You do not touch humanity, ever. In the command centers, soldiers cheered. In the factories, workers raised their fists. In the training academies, young pilots embraced each other. In the streets of every human city, people gathered and repeated the president's words. The silent year was over. Now came the storm. The Galactic Council had prepared for war. They were not fools. Even if they believed humanity was weak, they knew that cornered animals could be dangerous. So they had positioned their fleets along the borders of human space. Thousands of warships waited for the attack that everyone expected. They looked in the wrong direction. Admiral Shin sat in the command chair of her flagship, the Vengeance. She was 53 years old, with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had served in the fleet for 30 years, rising from a simple pilot to the commander of the first expeditionary fleet. Around her, 200 warships waited in the darkness between stars. They had traveled for weeks through empty space, avoiding all known patrol routes. Colonel's intelligence had given them a map of every sensor station, every checkpoint, every place where Council ships might spot them. Final status report, Admiral Shin said calmly. Her tactical officer commander checked his screens. All ships report ready. Navigation confirms jump coordinates are locked. We will emerge directly above the target. Enemy detection probability. Near zero, Admiral. They have no sensors in that location. They never expected anyone to be stupid enough to jump this close to a gravity well. Admiral Shin allowed herself a small smile. The Council believed that faster-than-light jumps required clear space, far from any large objects. The gravitational pull of planets and moons made such jumps dangerous. Most species would never attempt what she was about to do. Human navigators had spent the silent year training for exactly this maneuver. They had practiced thousands of times in simulation. They had calculated every variable, accounted for every risk. It was still dangerous, but it was possible. And it would change everything. Begin the jump, Admiral Shin ordered. The stars stretched and twisted as the fleet entered faster-than-light travel. For a few seconds, the universe became a blur of light and color. Then, suddenly, they were somewhere else. The moon of Prime hung before them. On its surface, the great communication hub of the Galactic Council stretched across hundreds of kilometers. Every military signal in Council space passed through this facility. It was the nerve center of their entire civilization. And it had no defenses above it. Why would it need them? No enemy could possibly appear here without warning. "We have complete surprise," Commander reported. "No enemy ships within range. The surface installations are not responding." Admiral Shin looked at the moon below. Somewhere down there, technicians were going about their normal work. They had no idea that death had arrived above them. She thought of Admiral Park. She thought of the 2,400 people who had died for no reason other than the Council's arrogance. She thought of the families who had watched their loved ones executed on live broadcast. "All batteries," she said, her voice steady. "Fire." 200 warships opened fire simultaneously. Missiles streaked toward the surface. Energy beams cut through the thin atmosphere. The communication hub, built over thousands of years, was destroyed in minutes. Across Council space, military commanders suddenly lost contact with each other. Orders that had been transmitted from Central Command simply stopped arriving. Fleet admirals called for instructions and received only static. Generals on the ground tried to report their status and heard nothing. The Council's military, built on centuries of coordinated strategy, suddenly went blind and deaf. While Admiral Shin's fleet began destroying secondary targets on the moon, other human forces struck throughout Council space. Captain led her fighter squadron against the fuel depot at Station. The station was enormous, holding enough fuel to supply the entire border fleet for months. It was also poorly defended. The Council had never expected anyone to attack this deep inside their territory. Her fighters emerged from faster-than-light travel just kilometers from the station. The defenders had no time to react. "All pilots," ordered, "target the fuel tanks. One pass, then we jump out. No heroics. We have 16 more targets to hit tonight." Her squadron fired as one. The fuel depot exploded in a massive fireball that could be seen from nearby planets. Before the debris had even settled, the human fighters were gone, jumping to their next target. Across Council space, similar attacks occurred simultaneously. 17 military outposts were destroyed. Ammunition stores, repair facilities, sensor stations, command centers. The humans did not try to capture anything. They simply destroyed it and moved on. High Arbiter received the reports in his palace on Prime. Each message was worse than the last. "The communication hub is gone," an aide reported, his voice shaking. "We have lost contact with 60% of our fleets. The fuel depot has been destroyed. The 7th Fleet has no way to refuel. The repair station at IV is gone. The 3rd Fleet's damaged ships cannot be fixed." Space turned pale. "How is this possible? Our border fleets reported no human ships." "The attacks came from inside our territory, High Arbiter. They bypassed our borders entirely." "That is impossible. No one can jump that deep into our space without being detected." Another aide rushed in, carrying a data tablet. "High Arbiter, we are receiving a transmission. It is appearing on every screen in Council space." Grabbed the tablet. On the screen, 4 words appeared in the human language, with translations in every Council tongue. "We remember the..." The High Arbiter stared at the message. For the first time, he felt something he had not felt in centuries: fear. Back on this vengeance, Admiral Shin received reports from all attack groups. The first strikes had been successful beyond their hopes. Not a single human ship had been lost. "Orders from Fleet Command," her communications officer reported. "The second phase begins in 4 hours. We are to proceed to Rally Point 7 and prepare for Operation Iron Wave." Admiral Shin nodded. The first strike had been about crippling the Council's ability to coordinate. The second phase would be about something else entirely. She looked at the burning moon below. A year ago, she had watched the execution like everyone else. She had seen Admiral Park stand tall before his killers. She had heard his last words. "Remember what they did," he had said, "and never let them do it again." She intended to honor those words. "Set course for Rally Point 7, she ordered, "and send a message to Fleet Marshal. Tell him the door is open." Across human space, the fleets that had been waiting began to move. Thousands of ships, carrying millions of soldiers, headed toward Council space. The silent year was over. The preparations were complete. Now the real war would begin. In the Parliament building on Earth, President watched the reports come in. For a year, she had lived with the weight of her decision. She had ordered total war. She had set her people on a path that would cost millions of lives. But watching the first strike succeed, she felt no joy, only grim determination. "How long until the Council can reorganize?" she asked Fleet Marshal. The old soldier studied the data. "Weeks, at minimum. Their fleets cannot coordinate without the communication hub. Their admirals will have to make decisions on their own, and most of them have never done that before. They relied on central command for everything." "And our next move?" "We advance, but not everywhere. We will cut them apart piece by piece. By the time they figure out how to fight without their command structure, we will have destroyed their ability to supply their ships." The president nodded. "And the civilian populations?" "We do not target civilians. Our soldiers know this. We are not here for revenge against innocent people. We are here to break their military power and ensure they can never threaten us again." Looked out the window at the sky above Seoul. Somewhere up there, her people were fighting and dying. "Make sure they remember that," she said quietly. "We are not monsters. We are just very, very angry." The Galactic Council recovered slowly. Their fleets were scattered, their supply lines broken, their communication networks destroyed. But they still had numbers on their side. 50 species against one. Thousands of worlds against hundreds. Millions of ships against thousands. They began to fight back. They gathered their border fleets and sent them hunting for human ships. The hegemony mobilized their ground armies and prepared to reclaim any world the humans had touched. Other council species, fearing what would happen if they did not contribute, sent whatever forces they could spare. What they found was not what they expected. General O commanded the ground forces on VII, the first world occupied by human soldiers. It was a small planet on the edge of territory, valuable only because of its strategic location. They wanted it back. 3 armies marched toward the planet's capital city. 100,000 warriors, proud and confident. They had conquered dozens of worlds in their history. One species of newcomers would not stop them. General O was 47 years old. She was small, even by human standards, but her soldiers would follow her into any battle. She had spent the silent year studying every war in human history, looking for lessons that could help against an enemy with superior numbers. She found her answer in the strategies of ancient generals who had faced impossible odds. When they landed on VII, they found the cities empty. Every human soldier had retreated into the mountains. Every civilian had been evacuated weeks ago. The general, a massive warrior named, ordered his troops to occupy the capital. "The humans have fled," he announced. "They are cowards, just as the council said. Secure the city and prepare for the next phase." His soldiers marched into the empty streets. They set up headquarters in the government buildings. They celebrated their easy victory. Then the explosions began. General O had spent weeks preparing. Every building in the city was rigged with explosives. Every street was trapped. Every victory the thought they had won was a lie. The capital city became a tomb. Thousands of soldiers died in seconds. The survivors ran for the open ground, only to find human soldiers waiting in the mountains with clear lines of fire. "They think in terms of territory," General O told her officers as they watched from their hidden positions. They measure victory by the ground they hold. We think in terms of enemies killed. A city means nothing. A planet means nothing. What matters is destroying their ability to fight. The Battle of VII lasted 3 weeks. They sent 2 more armies. General O let them advance, let them feel confident, and then destroyed them with traps and ambushes. By the end, only a handful of soldiers remained alive. General O allowed them to escape. She wanted them to tell others what had happened. Across Council space, similar stories played out. The humans did not fight like any species the Council had faced before. They did not defend territory. They did not seek glory. They simply destroyed everything their enemies needed to continue fighting. Supply ships were ambushed in deep space. Fuel convoys were attacked and burned. Repair facilities were bombed before they could finish fixing damaged warships. The Council's fleets grew weaker every day, not from great battles but from 1,000 small wounds. Lieutenant Park served on the colony world of Nu. She was 26 years old, a combat medic who had joined the military to save lives rather than take them. She believed that even in war, humanity should show its best qualities. They did not share her beliefs. When their ground forces attacked Nu, they faced fierce resistance from human defenders. The battle turned against them. In desperation, the commander ordered chemical weapons deployed against civilian shelters. Park was treating wounded soldiers when the news came. She grabbed her medical kit and ran toward the shelters. What she found there would haunt her forever. Hundreds of civilians lay on the ground, their bodies twisted in pain. Children cried for parents who would never answer. The chemical agent attacked the nervous system, causing slow, agonizing death. Park worked for 18 hours straight. She saved as many as she could, but she also did something else. She recorded everything. Every body, every survivor's testimony, every piece of evidence showing what they had done. She compiled it all into a document and sent it to Colonel's intelligence network. Within days, the footage was broadcast across neutral space. Species that had stayed out of the war saw what the Council was capable of. They saw children dying from poison gas. They saw soldiers laughing as they deployed the weapons. The collective had been members of the Council for 3,000 years. They were a peaceful species who valued life above all else. When they saw what they had done on Nu, they from the Alliance, their ambassador made a public statement. We cannot stand beside those who murder children. The Council has lost its honor. The Trade Federation followed soon after. They were not warriors but traitors. War was bad for business, but war crimes were worse. They ceased all supply contracts with fleets. Ships that had been carrying food and fuel suddenly stopped arriving. High Arbiter watched his alliance crumble. Species that had been loyal for centuries were abandoning the Council. Neutral powers that had stayed quiet were now speaking against them. Even among this own people, there were whispers of doubt. The humans are not just fighting us, his military advisor reported. They are fighting our reputation. They are turning the galaxy against us. Made his decision. If humanity wanted to paint the Council as monsters, then the Council would become monsters. He ordered harsher measures, more executions of prisoners, more attacks on civilian targets. He believed that terror would break human will. He was wrong. Each atrocity only strengthened human resolve. Soldiers who might have shown mercy now fought without hesitation. Civilians who had questioned the war now supported it completely. Every crime the Council committed became fuel for the fire that was consuming them. Captain learned that her cousin had died on Nu. She was in her fighter when she received the news. She did not cry. She simply changed course toward the nearest fleet and spent the next 6 hours destroying everything she could find. Her squadron followed her without question. They had all lost someone. They were all beyond grief. What remained was cold, calculated hatred. By the end of the second year of war, the situation had changed completely. The Council still had more ships, more soldiers, more resources. But their alliances were broken. Their supply lines were chaos. Their soldiers were tired and demoralized. Meanwhile, humanity kept coming. Every ship that was destroyed was replaced by two more. Every soldier who fell had 3 volunteers ready to take their place. The factories of human space worked day and night, producing weapons and ships and supplies. In the Parliament building on Earth, President met with her military commanders. "How much longer?" she asked. Fleet Marshal studied the maps. "The path to Prime is almost clear. We have broken their outer defenses. Their fleets are scattered and cannot reform. If we press forward now, we can end this war within a year." "And the cost?" The old soldier was quiet for a moment. 400 million of our people have died, Madam President. Soldiers, civilians, children. The Council has fought with everything they have. And them? We estimate their military losses at 3 billion. Their civilian casualties are unknown, but substantial. The President closed her eyes. 400 million. She had ordered this. Every single death was her responsibility. "Then let us end it," she said. "Prepare the final offensive." The third year of war began with the largest military operation in human history. 12,000 warships gathered at the edge of space. 4 million soldiers prepared to fight their way to the enemy capital. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon humanity could spare was committed to this final offensive. Fleet Marshal stood on the bridge of the command ship Unity of Terra. He was 74 years old now, his hair completely white, his face lined with exhaustion and grief. He had buried his only son 6 months ago, killed at the Battle of Gate. His grandson, Lieutenant, served aboard the cruiser Indomitable, somewhere in the fleet ahead. The old marshal had given everything to this war: his family, his health, his belief that the galaxy could ever be peaceful. All that remained was his duty. Admiral Shin walked beside him, reviewing the battle plans. She had become his most trusted commander over the past 3 years. Her first fleet had won 17 major engagements. She had never retreated. "Intelligence reports that the Council is preparing to offer surrender terms," she said quietly. Did not look at her. "What terms did they offer the?" "None, sir." "Then they receive none. We will accept unconditional surrender only. The Council will be dissolved. The war criminals will face justice. There will be no negotiation." Admiral Shin nodded. She had expected this answer. She agreed with it. The fleet moved forward. The Council had gathered everything they had left for the defense of Prime. 8,000 warships formed a wall around the home system. Ground forces numbering in the hundreds of millions waited on every planet and moon. Ancient defensive stations, built over thousands of years, protected the approaches. High Arbiter commanded from the surface. He had refused all suggestions that he evacuate. If the Dominion was going to fall, he would fall with it. "They cannot break through," he told his generals. "We have the advantage of position. Our stations will destroy them before they reach the inner system." His generals were less confident. They had watched human tactics for 3 years. They had learned that the humans always found a way to do what seemed impossible. The Battle of Prime began with a wave of missiles. Human ships fired from extreme range, sending thousands of warheads toward the defensive stations. Most were intercepted, but some got through. Explosions lit up the darkness of space. Then came the human ships. Admiral Shin led the first fleet directly at the center of the Council formation. She did not try to find a weakness. She simply attacked the strongest point with everything she had. The Council commanders were confused. This was not how wars were fought. No sensible commander attacked the enemy's greatest strength. They suspected a trick. There was no trick. The humans simply did not care about losses anymore. Captain flew at the front of her squadron. She had lost count of how many battles she had survived. Her original squad of 20 pilots was down to 7. The rest had died over the past 3 years in a dozen different engagements. She had stopped learning new names. It was easier that way. Her fighter dove toward a council cruiser, lasers blazing. She destroyed the ship's engines and moved to the next target without looking back. Behind her, the cruiser drifted helplessly, soon to be destroyed by the human capital ships following in her wake. "All squadrons maintain formation," she ordered. "We push through to the stations. Nothing else matters." On the 6th day of battle, she found herself facing a wing of fighters. There were 30 of them. She had 8 pilots left. She did not hesitate. The dogfight lasted 20 minutes. When it ended, 7 fighters were destroyed and the rest were retreating. But Squadron had paid a terrible price. She was the only one left. Her fighter was damaged, barely flying. Her weapons were nearly empty. She looked around at the empty space where her pilots had been and felt nothing. She had no tears left. "Captain," a voice came over the radio. It was Admiral Shin. "Your squadron's sacrifice has opened a gap in the enemy formation. Return to the fleet for repairs." "Negative," Admiral replied. "My fighter can make one more run, transmitting target data now." She sent the coordinates. A defensive station weakened by the battle, its shields flickering. One good hit and it would fall. "Captain, your ship cannot survive that attack." "I know," adjusted her course. "Tell my family I died doing my duty, and tell that pilot first class of the has been avenged." Her brother, after 3 years, she finally said his name out loud. Her fighter accelerated toward the station. She fired every weapon she had left, not at the station itself, but at the power generator that kept its shields running. The generator exploded. The station's shields fell. Behind her, a wave of human missiles struck the unprotected station. It broke apart in a massive explosion that could be seen from Prime itself. Captain died instantly. She never felt the fireball that consumed her fighter. The battle continued. Colonel led the intelligence teams that accompanied the ground assault on Prime itself. They had one mission: capture the Council's records. Every order, every communication, every piece of evidence showing who had planned the execution of this crew. The landing was brutal. Ground forces fought with desperation, knowing that defeat meant the end of everything they had built. Human soldiers advanced block by block through the capital city, taking casualties at every step. Colonel moved with a squad of Special Forces soldiers. They were heading for the Council archives, buried deep beneath the government district. The records were there. The proof was there. They reached the archive entrance on the 9th day. A squad of guards stood between them and the door. Colonel ordered his soldiers to take cover and called for the guards to surrender. They responded with weapons fire. The firefight lasted only minutes, but it cost Colonel 3 of his soldiers. He led the final charge himself, breaking through the guards' position with grenades and close-quarters combat. A blade caught him in the chest as he entered the archive. He felt the cold metal pierce his body. He saw the guard who had stabbed him, a young with fear in his eyes. Colonel shot the guard and kept moving. He reached the central console, blood pouring from his wound. His fingers worked the controls, copying every file to a secure transmitter. Everything, every secret the Council had ever kept. His soldiers found him slumped over the console, the transmission complete. He was still breathing, barely. "Sir, we need to get you to a medic," one soldier said. Colonel smiled weakly. "Just make sure that data reaches Earth. That's all that matters." He died 3 hours later in a field hospital, surrounded by soldiers he had trained. His last words were coordinates, the location of a hidden weapons depot that he had discovered years ago and never had a chance to report. On the 11th day, human soldiers breached the council chambers. High Arbiter sat on his throne. Around him lay the bodies of his personal guards. They had fought to the last, dying one by one as human forces pushed through the building. He looked at the soldiers entering the chamber with something between terror and disbelief. These were the people he had called inferior. These were the children he had thought to discipline. They had destroyed everything. Sergeant Han was the first to reach the throne. He was 23 years old his grandfather had been a cook aboard the. He had watched the old man die on the broadcast, standing in the third row behind Admiral Park. "You've destroyed everything," whispered. "Billions dead, worlds burned for what? Revenge." Sergeant Han looked at the alien who had started all of this. He felt no anger. He felt nothing at all. There had been too much death for anger. "Not revenge," he said quietly. "A lesson." He raised his rifle. "You do not touch our people." The shot echoed through the empty chamber. The war was over.